So next, we actually invite Gary Allen from Ryder to talk about supply chain and logistics innovation. Hey, Gary. Gary is Vice President of Supply Chain Excellence for Ryder System, an industry-leading Fortune 500 commercial transportation, logistics, and supply chain management solutions company. In his position, he is responsible for overseeing product development, solution design, continuous improvement, business analytics, and automation to support business development and existing operations for the overall supply chain and dedicated transportation organization. Gary has more than 30 years of experience in supply chain services. His area of expertise range from process improvement, logistics outsourcing, new product development, business transformation, system selection and implementation, operational due diligence, business performance improvement, overall supply chain strategy. So I'm sure everyone's very eager to hear what Gary actually has to say. So we're going to actually pass it off to you.
Thank you, James. Let me present my screen. Okay, what I want to cover today is focused on the logistics side, and I think that the past presenters kind of highlighted a lot of the topics. What I want to cover are some of the things that we're seeing in the industry, what Ryder is doing to apply those new solutions, as well as how does that affect the construction and project industries today. From a Ryder perspective, I think most of you are aware of Ryder. I just want to kind of highlight a few things because I think everybody is aware that Ryder manages transportation, but we do a lot more than transportation and trucking. We have almost 40,000 employees across a variety of different business units. We have about 10,000 drivers. We have 55 million square feet of warehousing space that we manage today. We also have technicians that repair, maintain vehicles. So we do a lot more than just trucking and transportation today. And in fact, if you're focused on the construction and project side of the industry, the industrial segment is probably about 30% of our business today. And so that includes customers in the oil and gas space, whether it's Chevron and Shell, the utilities in the telco space, whether it's Verizon, Florida Power and Light, as well as construction. We do a lot of elevator work with Otis. We do warehousing distribution as well as to construction sites as well. So what I want to highlight, a lot of the past presenters covered kind of what's happening in the industry today. And the exciting thing is there are a lot of new innovations going on, as Todd mentioned. I think the challenge is, there's so many new technologies, so many new companies. The past presenters, whether Martin and Ravi, kind of highlighted the explosion of data. It's a huge challenge for the operating companies out there. They'll kind of talk through what we're doing. Ravi covered IoT, the impact of e-commerce, kind of the wanting it now, as well as asset sharing. If you consider we own and maintain over 270,000 trucks today. We have more trucks in North America than anybody else. So how can we share those trucks across customers? And in fact, our oil and gas customers kind of pushed us down that path to look at how we can share. And then looking at it from a holistic network perspective, there's a lot going on, but how do you connect the dots? Todd kind of talked about, intelligent production, and we look at it as intelligent supply chain and intelligent logistics. And then lastly, getting into the new vehicle technologies as well as autonomous. And so we'll kind of talk through. I like to summarize kind of the disruptive trends really around three categories. One around the Amazon effect, which is impacting the focus on the customer. Two around Uber, which is more around kind of that asset sharing and sharing economy. And then, three around alternative vehicles or the Tesla effect. So we're going to talk through what we're doing and how to apply it in the construction project industry. What does it mean? There's a focus on customer demand. Data analytics is exploding. The other interesting thing is the impact of wage and labor pressures. For us, we employ a lot of warehouse workers as well as drivers and technicians. And there's a dynamic of the wage rates that are increasing, and that compared to the technology costs that are decreasing is actually bringing in a lot of new innovations into play that a lot of companies weren't thinking through before. And then also availability of replacement parts, additive manufacturing, 3D printing has been around, but a lot of those applications are kind of coming in light now. And we've really coined it around three main themes to think about. One is the digital supply chain. So how do we use data to drive insights? How do you look at that across your supply chain, not in the silos that were talked about before? And then how do you make the customer and the user experience kind of front and center? And then around the distribution materials management, how do you use the technologies that are out there to not only optimize and drive productivities and efficiencies, but how do all those nodes across the supply chain become intelligent to either track information and make sure you understand where the goods and materials are. And then the last thing around transportation, if you look at it, all of our trucks, we have 270,000 trucks, we have almost 10,000 drivers. All of our trucks have GPS telematics in them, right? And then we also deployed an app that we can digitize trips and remove paperwork. So how can we leverage the sensors, the telematics, the IoT to use that information to kind of move from not only visibility that Ravi touched on, but how do we use that to improve transparency? And the difference around transparency is more of the context of not only what's happening, why is it occurring, and then how can you avoid it in the future? So some of the things that we're doing at Ryder today, first is around digitizing supply chain. One of the tools that we deployed is a tool we call RyderShare. And Ravi touched around visibility, but we look at RyderShare as end-to-end collaboration and transparency. So any of our logistics operations, if a customer does business with us, we deploy this tool. And this is from tracking shipments to tracking inventory inside a warehouse. And then more importantly, how do you monitor the exceptions and then over time be able to predict those exceptions to minimize disruptions across your supply chain? And we've seen tremendous benefits around automating that activity, especially around getting people off of phones, keyboards, and utilizing RPA to drive efficiencies. Another area is around analytics. On my team, we have about 75 data science and data analytics team members. And we'll describe what they're doing around the soccer example of kind of a heat map of players. Think of this as we are tracking, every asset, every forklift. We're also deploying IoT around where people reside in a warehouse, in a materials location, to be able to look at not only the flow of people and goods, it's then what do you do with that information around comparing plan versus actual to then drive improvements. I think the challenge around all the data and what's happening in the industry is what do you do with it? And then how do you make it easy to interpret at a user level and an operating level is one of the key challenges. On the asset sharing side, I mentioned our oil and gas customers, as well as our food and CPG customers, drove us to say, hey, you're dedicating trucks and drivers to our business. I'd rather look at it as a regional approach to be able to share assets across businesses. And we deployed a product that we call Coop. Right now, it's in 3 different states, and we're looking to roll this out nationwide. But think of Coop as kind of the Uber for trucking, right? If a customer has available assets, or even we at Ryder have available assets that we want to deploy and share to improve utilization, we can go into the Coop app, and it's a very simple transaction. I'll talk about the bottom left around smart warehousing and automation in a second. But on the advanced vehicle technology, we are in the midst of deploying new technology, whether it's electrical vehicles, whether it's EVs, as well as autonomous vehicles today. And we'll kind of talk about the world of autonomous. The autonomous vehicles today, we partner with a company called Ike. And a lot of the lanes that we're piloting are more of the long haul highway type activities. Our view of autonomous is it's going to take a few years, but the long haul nodes are kind of the first thing to go, along with private yards. And if we think about construction and oil and gas and remote field operations, that is ripe to leverage the autonomous technology. So if we look at how do you deploy and what technology is ready now that our customers or we're deploying on behalf of our customers, a lot of the autonomous mobile robots, and these are units that bring goods to an operator. Now, a lot of this may not apply to construction, but in the package world, parts world, these are readily available, very economic. They drive flexibility. You can move them around and deploy them across facilities. Drones, Jay made reference to drones. Drones, I would say a portion of it's ready now. If you think of how we're using it to alleviate yard checks. So if we have a large operation with hundreds of vehicles, we don't have to send a person out to actually do inventory checks. Inside the four walls, it's a little further off because of the accuracy getting down to a unit level in a location is still a challenge. Bot-based ASRSs, which is automatic storage and retrieval systems. It's far more flexible now because you can interact kind of the bots like a AMR with more of a fixed unit. Vision AR, Martin kind of talked about, augmented reality and visual reality. This is ready now. And a lot of the construction field operations are deploying the technology. The thing that's changing in this space is it's alleviating an additional device to be able to do scanning, right? Part of the challenge was the optics and the graphical displays to be able to pick up barcodes. So now with some of the newer technologies, we can use AR to basically eliminate handheld scanning. But then if you have any type of complex, value-added assembly or remote diagnostics, you can then patch in from a central location. Autonomous vehicles are ready now. They used to be pretty expensive. They've been around. AGVs have been around for decades. What's changing there is the price points coming down and being, it's far more economical than it has been in the past. Analytics and insights. A lot of what we're talking about today is how do we use this data to drive, automation intelligence. And that's really the key is right now, a lot of it is trying to normalize data. If we look at what Ryder does, we have thousands of customers, we have hundreds of execution systems, and really the first challenge is how do you normalize that data? How do you figure out what the use case is? And then how do you translate that data so it's easy to use in the field? And that's really a lot of the work that we're doing today. And then the last piece is around IoT. As I mentioned, we are tracking all of our MHE in the field. We are tracking every truck, every vehicle. So it comes down to what do you do with that data? What does it mean? And then how do you avoid exceptions and disruptions out in the field? What's coming in the future is more of what the previous panelists talked. It's more around AI. We are doing things around machine learning, more around forecasting demand, forecasting labor, forecasting transportation needs. We see a big opportunity to be able to leverage that data around how do you simulate across your supply chain, each of the nodes in your supply chain, and then combine that simulation with the data analytics to actually, look at more predictive and prescriptive type of capabilities. The other thing that we're working on and what's coming in the future is how do you pull all this data together in an integrated fashion across numerous parties, numerous systems, to be able to then simplify and do something with that data from a control perspective, right? And so that side of the space is changing pretty dramatically today. So we see a lot of advancements in the future around kind of this fully integrated IoT solution. If we look at and switch gears around the construction industry, I think everybody is aware of kind of the impact around project logistics and what does it mean. So trying to apply some of the technologies and innovations to address things like remote locations, challenges with health and safety. How do you actually look at the reverse side of it, being returns and the materials coming back, as well as the challenge around complexity. I mean, I would say construction, oil and gas, and any of the project logistics, frankly, is one of the most complex supply chains that we see out there. And predominantly because of the number of participants, disparate systems, and then trying to bring all that data together. So if you look at this from a holistic perspective, I really break it up in three components. One that we talked about up front is how can you translate, the planning from not only a production or a site plan or a construction plan, but how do you translate that into a production plan? And then from a logistics perspective, getting that down into what I would call like a logistics release, or being able to quantify that into shipments and transportation needs and warehousing needs. The thing that's changing on that side is network design used to be something you look at monthly, quarterly, annually. It's now shifting into more of that daily, weekly simulation to say, do I have enough nodes? What do I do with the flow of materials? The second piece is in the middle, and this is kind of this inbound supply chain portion of it. And what do I need to do around the visibility of the controls up until staging of materials? Do I look at offsite facilities, staging configuration before I get to a job site? And then the last is kind of on the job itself and some of the complexities in the field. And then just wrapping it up around what does this mean around if you apply the technologies to the construction and project-based business. The first is to increase project certainty. We talked about, improved planning. The second piece is then reducing the single project cost. So looking at how do we leverage visibility and transparency? How do we optimize the material flow? How do we look at the nodes in the supply chain to reduce complexity? And then the third segment is then how do we get into this industrialization segment around trying to standardize, once you normalize the data, to be able to standardize your processes so you can then use that data across all the different segments. And then the third piece is then optimization and being able to leverage all the new technologies to be able to drive efficiencies from a project base. And then just in closing, closing thoughts around things to keep in mind for the audience. The first is, how do you manage the data? What is the use case? And then how do you simplify it to be able to utilize that data to get to more of, this insights and predictive? The second piece is how do you take a holistic approach around intelligent, not only production and project management, is intelligent supply chain and logistics planning as well. The third that we talked about is that transparency end-to-end across your supply chain. And then the fourth is around how do you integrate this across all the different tools and technologies and take a control and systematic approach behind it, and then leveraging those new technologies going forward. And then just lastly is how do we work together across different suppliers, capabilities, and partners to be able to drive efficiencies towards the future. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Gary. That was very well presented and opened our eyes actually to what possibilities that there are in the world of logistics, including some of the new equipment that I have never seen before. So thank you very much.